Welcome to The Power of Now What, a podcast on overcoming the various problems and challenges that one encounters when on the spiritual path, on the spiritual journey, when engaged in a practice such as meditation, and even post awakening and post the enlightenment experience itself. This is episode 6 on the subject of the dark night of the soul. I usually have a humorous alternative title, but there's nothing funny about this subject. It's dark. Well, the clue's in the title, The Dark Night of the Soul. In fact, that's going to be my humorous alternative title. The clue is in the title, The Dark Night of the Soul. The very name itself tells you pretty much everything that you need to know about this phenomena. The dark night of the soul is something that isn't as frequently discussed or talked about in the spiritual circles as I believe it probably should be. There are various videos on it. It does get discussed, but it's something that you don't see cropping up as often as some of the other queries, questions, and challenges that are usually presented to spiritual teachers. And I believe there's two reasons why it doesn't come up. Because, for one thing, us annoying spiritual folk are supposed to be very chipper and very upbeat about the whole spiritual process. And we fall into the trap of being too positive about the whole spiritual endeavor. We sort of promise that it's just going to be all sunshine and rainbows and wonderful and lovely and achieving a wonderfully enlightened, blissful state where you don't experience any issues anymore. And we talk like this about the spiritual path, I believe, because we don't want to put people off. We don't want to put anyone off by talking about perhaps there are also some rather unpleasant downsides to the spiritual journey. And people are kind of a little bit squeamish about talking about these certain things because they're worried about putting people off from trying the process. So we're often like, get into meditation. You'll get more present. You'll be lighter. You'll be happier. You'll have better relationships. You'll have better work life. You'll have better finances. All of that. And we never add in, and also, at some point, you're gonna experience the depth of utter total despair and misery. Cheers, then. I'll teach you all about the meditation, and because people will be like, wait, what? What was that? What was that bit about the despair? What was that bit about the total darkness? It's like, no, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that bit. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. To start with, let's do some breathing exercises and find the present moment. So that's one of the reasons we don't really talk about it, because if you were to mention it, maybe people wouldn't. We feel like people wouldn't want to engage with the spiritual path, but I think we're doing people a huge disservice. I'll get to that in a moment, but I don't know why. I mean, I believe in people. I'm confident in people's ability. After all, we are all universal infinite consciousness. I think universal infinite consciousness is more than capable of going through a dark night of the soul. It absolutely is. I don't think we're going to put people off by talking about it. I think sometimes maybe in the vein of it's cruel. It's you got to be cruel to be kind sometimes. I think that would be the spiritual, the general spiritual landscape could do with a little more of that sometimes, in my humble opinion, obviously. It's similar in my role as a personal trainer and a gym instructor. We're often very, you go into a gym and you see these posters that you see on the wall of everyone on a treadmill with a full face of makeup and a beaming smile and not a drop of sweat on their brow. And they're all just smiling and laughing on these treadmills. And they're all on these exercise bikes, just loving it. They're just absolutely beaming smiles, thumbs up all around. And if you've ever actually been in a gym, I don't think I've ever seen anyone smiling on a treadmill. I think if you're smiling on a treadmill, it, you're not going fast enough. It's tough, it's hard, and it's kind of difficult as a personal trainer and a gym instructor. We're trying to encourage people to take up the habit of exercise. And so we're always thumbs up and saying, yeah, it's lovely, it's wonderful, you'll enjoy more energy, you'll have a better life, you'll look better, be more attractive. It's going to be wonderful for you. And we never mention that, oh, yeah, and by the way, exercise sucks. It's really tough, really difficult. And your legs are going to burn, you're going to be sweating, it's hard as nails. We very rarely mention that for fear of putting people off. But I think we're doing people a huge disservice. I think we should tell people it's gonna be tough. And hey, guess what? If you want to lose weight and you're dieting, hey, you're gonna feel hungry. I really don't know what else to tell you. You're gonna feel hungry at some point if you're dieting. It comes with it. It's a part of the process, and in many ways, it is the process. Dieting is you are purposefully putting yourself in a state of hunger. So why are we then surprised because we're hungry when we're dieting? There shouldn't really be a surprise. And it's like this on the spiritual journey. I think because we get promised this idea that you're just going to be absolutely buzzing for the rest of your life once you start meditation, when you start to experience some of the less pleasant aspects of the spiritual journey, you start to think that something is wrong, that you're doing it wrong, that something's gone wrong within you, within your brain. You start to feel like is there something wrong with my soul? Do I have a lot of karma to get through? Am I being attacked by unpleasant, evil, unseen forces? We think all of that is happening because nobody prepared us for what's coming. And I think this is why I think it's a good idea to just be honest about it. Just as a gym instructor and a personal trainer, I wouldn't be doing my job if I lied about how difficult exercise and diet is. The spiritual path is tough, but it's worth it. It's worth it once you get through to the other side. Just as with exercise, you put the work in, and whilst people are training, they cannot stand their personal trainer because the personal trainer is saying, do one more push up, do another kilometer. And the client or member is going, I hate you. But then on the other side of it, they are beaming smiles and they say, thank you. Thank you for pushing me through it because now I can feel all of the benefits of the training. So that's one reason that I think it doesn't really get talked about that much. And the second reason I think it probably doesn't get as much material and content on it as some of the other aspects is that there's not really much you can do once you're in it. Once you have entered the dark night of the soul, you have been, it's as though you've been sucked into the infinite universal consciousness. Your ego, your individual identity, your sense of being a finite, separate, temporary self has been sucked up into the infinite universal consciousness. And that essentially is what's happening. I'll discuss that a little bit more later on. And once that's happened, once that process has begun, there really isn't a great deal. It's as it's you've achieved your goal. You've done it. It's finally happened, and here you are. You did what you wanted, which is for now this process to be automatic. And that's partly what makes it so terrifying is that there's no way back now. You walked through the door, turned around and saw the door's gone. But I'll explain a little bit more about that and how to approach it. I really hope that I'm not portraying this to be a horrifying experience because it's not. I really don't want to put anyone off. I'm just being honest about it. And maybe you've clicked on this video because you're going through it yourself. If you are going through a dark night of the soul yourself, I have nothing but words of encouragement and comfort for you. You're going to keep going. You're going to get through to the other side of it. And I've got some advice on how to get through it later on in this podcast. Um, so that's the second reason that I think we don't talk about it too often, because once you're in it, you're in it. So there's not really that much advice. I can give words of encouragement and comfort, but I can't give that much advice because it's such an individual process. Everyone goes through something slightly different. And some people go through a very short one. There's nothing really much happens. Other people, it goes on for years, perhaps even decades. And other people don't even experience it at all. And maybe that's another reason it doesn't really get discussed, because I would also not want people to think that just because if you haven't gone through a dark night of the soul and you're not going through it, that doesn't mean you're not doing it right. It doesn't mean you're not doing it thoroughly enough. Don't feel like, oh, where's my dark night of the soul? Don't worry about it. If it's not happened, then just don't worry about it. Don't try to make one. Don't manufacture one. Trust me, you don't want to. And don't create one, don't invent one. If there isn't one there for you, it's not there for you. You'll know it if you're going through it. So they're the two reasons I don't really think we talk about it a great deal. So let's get to what actually is it? What actually is the dark night of the soul? What's happening here? I think one of the best places to start when sort of discussing it is to recognize that most people go through something similar to a dark night of the soul at some point in their lives, even if they have no interest in spirituality, they've done nothing towards the spiritual journey. No, they're not interested in the slightest in spiritual development, and that's absolutely fine. You know, it's the infinite universal consciousness manifesting as billions of individual experiences. Who are we to say what people should do? Nothing. We're not here to do that. So some people just aren't interested, and yet everybody will experience a taste of a dark night of the soul most often when a major life event happens that threatens the individual sense of identity. When something comes along that strips away a large part of who you thought you were and threatens your general, very deeply held beliefs and worldview. When something comes along to rock the boat and shake it up, that's when people start to experience the shadow behind them start to rise up, and the dark night of the soul sort of blows a cold wind through them on the summer's day. So this could be something like the loss of a job. If somebody's heavily invested in their career and loses their job, it could be the loss of a marriage or a partner for whatever reason. It could be a breakdown in somebody's health, either physical or mental, a serious, either life threatening or disabling condition. Um, Very sad to talk about. Maybe even the loss of a child. These very very. Maybe I should start with a bit of a trigger warning, actually, on this podcast. Maybe a bit late to do that now, but we're going to be talking about some pretty rough stuff. So, and my heart goes out to you if you're experiencing any of this. The loss of anything that strips away your sense of identity. In some ways, I have to wonder if this is a part of the depression and difficulty that people suffer when they have children, when they have a newborn infant in their care. Because when you start devoting your entire being towards looking after someone else, a little baby one, then your entire identity dissolves and evaporates. And you hear a lot of new parents saying, I feel like my identity's gone. Where has my identity gone? And I think it's commonly mistaken as depression and is called depression when actually it's probably because of the loss of identity, it's triggered the dark night of the soul, just an aspect of it, just a glimmer of it. But what generally happens if we're not on the spiritual path or spiritual journey and we weren't prepared for this is that eventually, in time, other things come along to replace whatever it is that we've lost or whatever it is that is shaken up. I will also say it's not always a loss, maybe something comes in, something new gets added, and it triggers a dark night of the soul. I mean, it could happen. Let's say suddenly you won the lottery and suddenly you don't have any money worries at all. All of your financial problems are immediately solved, and all of your identity was tied up in your money woes, your money struggles, how hard you've had to work to make ends meet, and suddenly all of that is taken away. Well, you might end up in a bit of a dark night of the soul through something like that. It's just fascinating just how the universe works, really. Um, so a lot of the time, so maybe you go through something like that that threatens your identity, but generally speaking, we then just add something to it, or in time we get used to something, and so we start to build up a new identity as a result. So your marriage breaks down, you go through dark night of the soul for 2 years, and then you just get another marriage. Just found someone else, just slot someone else in. There you go, boom, job done. Maybe you had a huge health crisis, but in time you learn to manage it, you learn to deal with it, and you sort of move on with your health. You find a different way of being, different way of living, or maybe you find the cure and you get treated for it, and you get cured, have an operation, and there you go. It just sort of disappears back over the horizon. The dark cloud disappears, and you recover. You get back on your feet, and before you know it, well, that was just a dark period in your life. You don't really give it that much thought. So essentially, we lose a part of our ego, at which in spiritual terminology, ego tends to refer to our sense of being an individual, separate, temporary, finite, separate self. The term ego is quite confusing if you've got a more scientific background, but that's what we mean in terms of when we're talking on spiritual terminology. You lose a big chunk of your ego and you just replace it with another big chunk. And so you kind of avoided the depth of the dark night. Um, what happens in spirituality when you're really in depth into you're almost attempting to trigger this? So if you are going through a dark night of the soul, well done. If you've done this intentionally, you're on a spiritual path and you're earnest about this, you're really serious about this, you have come to recognize being a person doesn't work. Identifying with a temporary, finite, separate self does not work. It only creates more suffering. And hey, you, maybe you've already been through 3 marriages, you're going through yet another dark night of the soul, but you're now on the spiritual path and you go, you know what? I've seen through it. If I get another, it's just the same pattern repeating itself. I want out. I want out of the cycle. I'm tired of things breaking down. I replace it with something else, and then that thing breaks down. I'm tired of finding a coping mechanism that works for a year or two and then doesn't work. I want the solution. I want the permanent solution to this suffering. That that is the spiritual path. That is what awakening is. It's getting out of the loop. Get out of the cycle. You've turned around and faced it. You've realized what the problem is. It turns out it was the man in the mirror all along. The person in the mirror, I should say. It was the person in the mirror. It was nobody else. That's what's creating this cycle. So if you're experiencing the dark night of the soul intentionally, it's because you are serious and earnest about breaking free. I ain't going back in. I've had enough of the game. I've had enough of this movie. This, no matter how many times you watch the horror movie, the ending is always the same. It's the same scene repeating. I'm sick of it. I'm out. I want done. And so, if you're very sincere and earnest on the spiritual path about really going all the way, completing the journey, going through the gate, re- reach the top of the mountain, finally walk through the gateless gate and reach the unreachable peak, finally do it, you're probably going to encounter this issue, because the spiritual path, essentially, we are intentionally dropping the ego away. So it's not quite so painful. It's not like an unwilling and involuntary loss of identity. We're actually doing this on purpose. And so to drop the identity away on purpose huge chunks of it fall away, and it's a massive relief because that's what you were trying to get rid of. But perhaps we weren't prepared for the fact that if you really want to do it and go through the final gate and you really want to do it, you have to drop everything. Everything. Yes, even that, everything that you've been holding on to, because often we try to, stow something away in our pockets. I've done this again. I am not trying to put myself above anyone. I'm not trying to say that I'm perfect or I've completed it myself or done it, because the amount of times that I've tried to walk through that final gate, but I was just holding on to something in my pocket that I tried to sneak past St. Peter. And I was like, yep, I'm all here, no ego, no identity, nothing. And it's like, yeah, but what about, your intense identification with exercise? I'm like, oh, that? Oh, I can keep that, can't I? Turns out you can't. You can keep exercising, but you can't identify with it. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go do one last 10K run and then I'm going to come back. And off I go for another 10 years. Oh dear. Oh dear. So that's essentially what begins to trigger the dark night of the soul. In people who aren't on the spiritual path, they tend to just replace whatever they've lost with something else. But if you're earnest on the spiritual journey, you just realize, right, this is part of it. And actually, it's a good sign. So if you're experiencing it, it means that you've done something right. And you will know, your instincts will tell you, because your conditioning in your body will be panicking and will go, oh, everything's gone wrong, this isn't right, and you're having existential terror, existential doubt. In Zen, they say the great doubt will arrive, and that's what it feels like: doubt, terror. But it's almost too late for that. You just see it now, because doubt and terror is just another thought. Doubt and terror is just another emotion that will rise and pass. And you're so deeply established now. You have established yourself so deeply as the infinite universal consciousness that even the greatest terror cannot touch you, can't touch you. And so not to go running off and try this, try that, try another coping mechanism, because the game is over. It's done. And it's just a case of letting the terror pass. In many ways, I wanted to just, as a side note here, I feel like the pandemic, due to COVID. I mean, can anyone remember that now? Can you remember that period of time? What happened to that? Where did that go? What happened to that whole era of the entire planet? Where did it go? It's like no one talks about it anymore. It's crazy. So the pandemic, in many ways, I feel like was a dark night of the soul for the entire globe. I feel like the whole planet, all of humanity, went through a dark night of the soul when the pandemic hit, because it was a global loss of identity. All of a sudden, we couldn't function in the way that we were functioning, and everything that we thought made us human suddenly, overnight, disappeared. And so I think that's what's causing a big resurgence in this interest in spirituality at the moment, is because a lot of people had a massive shift in their life, in their social life, their romantic life, in their work life, in their health. A lot of people, billions of people, went through that. And anyone who's in any way spiritually sensitive will have felt the massive shift that has happened during that period of time. I wonder as well. I'm well aware that one of the power of Now What episode 2 about work seemingly has gotten into that algorithm somehow. I'm very well aware of this. It seems very popular. I think it may have struck a chord with a lot of people, because a lot of people through the pandemic have questioned on a very deep level the life that they were living. A lot of people couldn't go to work or had to change their work circumstances, and so this triggered a dark night of the soul, and it triggered a massive questioning of identity. And I think that's why a lot of people have recognized that their work life was killing them, their career was killing them, and are now shifting and changing their perspective on life. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. It shows you why these things happen. Crisis is just another word for opportunity, and it's forced presence. It forced people to take a look deeper. If you can't go outside, you got to go inside. And I wonder if that's what sort of triggered this massive surge and interest in more spiritual matters, because a lot of people had a lot of time on their hands to do a lot of introspection, and you notice a lot of people don't like to have time on their hands. The only difference between a prisoner and a monk is your perspective, and a lot of people felt like a prisoner, and some of those people took a deeper look and realized that this was an opportunity to live like a monk for a while. And if that's you, well done. Good job. It's good to introspect, no matter how terrifying and painful that can be at times. It's a beautiful, wonderful, liberating thing. So that's just a side note. It's just something that I found quite interesting about the pandemic. I feel like it triggered a massive upheaval, and a lot of people went through crisis, but are starting to come out of the other side of that crisis with a better understanding of themselves and a deeper insight into the nature of humanity and indeed reality itself. Let's take a look at what what the dark night of the soul feels like. I want to talk about it conceptually, and I want to talk then, more importantly, experientially. And hopefully, if you're going through this yourself, I hope I can have some words of guidance, support, and encouragement, because I've been through this myself. Could even say I'm still going through it now. Let's say I am. So, conceptually, as the ego falls away and the sense of individual identity, yes, we lose all of these things that were causing us suffering. But as this happens, what also goes with it is a lot of our protective mechanisms and a lot of our concepts, our ideas, our beliefs, and our general framework of perceiving ourselves and the world. And all of these things have been laid down over the years as a method of avoiding the present moment. When you finally get to the present moment, and without any sense of ego or identity, inevitably you are going to feel some of the same feelings that you felt when you were a child, actually, when you were an infant. A sense of helplessness, a sense of terror. And it was this sense of helplessness and terror that was the initial motivating factor in you beginning to build a false separate self in the first place. So we have the fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, the fear of not being able to take care of yourself, the fear of death itself. We build up this conceptual framework in our mind, and it's important to note it's an illusory framework, an illusory belief system. It's just thought. It's just thought and feeling, a narrative, a fairy tale that we tell ourselves to comfort that inner child, to say, hey, everything's all right. Everything's just fine, because we have this belief system, we have this understanding, we have this concept. This is who you are as a person. You've got all of this around you. You are perfectly safe. And we strip all that away. And how's that going to feel when all of that disappears? Obviously, a sense of existential terror is going to rise up within you. But it's too late. The belief system has gone. We have stripped away the individual identity, and now you are free to experience what you should have been experiencing all along, which is the raw intensity of life. The difference now is that you're experiencing the raw intensity of life as infinite universal consciousness. Infinite universal consciousness cannot die. It cannot die. It can't be hurt. It can't be harmed. It was never born, and so it will never die. It's always here. It never began. It will never end. Consciousness itself cannot feel terror. Consciousness itself cannot be afraid of dying. It cannot be afraid of abandonment. It cannot be afraid of whether it will be able to take care of itself or not. It is totally indestructible, totally, fully, and completely invulnerable and perfect forever. And that is the reality of your true nature that you are beginning to realize. So it's important to keep reaffirming that and keep experientially understanding that, because it's going to take a little while for the old belief systems to fall away and no belief system to take its place. That's the key. Don't try to introduce a new belief. We are developing a trust in our experience. That is the key. Develop trust in the experience. Don't create a new belief. Don't create a new framework. That's just falling into the old trap, the same old pattern, the same old rubbish. So, as the old belief system falls away and we begin to trust the new experience, naturally, this is going to feel kind of terrifying. So, moving into experientially for the individual, this can be deeply unpleasant, but it has a uniqueness to it. You will know that it's not just depression. You will know that it's not just a standard crisis that you've experienced before. It has a very different feel to it. At times, you will feel the same lovely liberation, wonderful peace and presence. And then you'll crash, you'll come falling right back down into total despair, horror, and terror. But what's actually happening here is that as you're beginning to trust the experience of the universal infinite peace, there's this sort of back and forth that starts to happen. You keep getting snapped back into the person. So my advice would be, if you feel that terror rising up, what that is just a sign that you're beginning to identify with your ego again. The ego is just going, oh, wait, hang on, no, one more thing before we go. And it will panic. And if you keep identifying with that, it's going to keep happening. It's just a case of, just as with any other thought, any other feeling, just treat them all the same. Any emotion that rises, just observe as consciousness and recognize that all is well. Trust your experience. Do not go back to identifying with ego and trying to create a new framework for what's happening. Just trust your experience, because experientially it can be very unsettling. And I don't want to discount or dismiss the feeling, because every now I've experienced this myself. I could just be standing there in line in Tesco and my heart sinks, and it's just triggered by the weirdest stuff. Like I don't know, see a pack of chewing gum and I'm like, wait a minute, that is that chewing gum really that do I enjoy the taste of chewing gum? But who is the me that enjoys the taste of chewing? And just a weird thing happens where you just go ah! Internally. I mean, I don't say it out loud. I'd be locked up by now if I said that out loud. But it's inside. You're like, whoa! There's like a vertigo sort of feeling. Vertigo is quite a good way of describing it, because everything is changing. Your perception, the way that you understand your own perceptions, is shifting. And so there's no longer even a sense of distance. The outside and inside world merge. And because the outside and inside merge, they neither exist all of a sudden. And this goes for physical space, as well as all of your concepts about what reality is made of shifts. And so every now and then you just get this huge surge of existential terror, and it can be very unsettling. So if you're going through it, I just want to say, just trust the process. It's not a sign that something's gone wrong. It's a sign that something's going very right. very, very, very right. Experientially, it feels like, but this is exactly what we were trying to do in the first place, because it's a sense of, well, nothing works. Well, we know nothing works. There's no way of comforting yourself now. And this is the freedom, because even if you were to go back to, let's say, usually previously you were smoking and you stopped, even if you went back to smoking, it wouldn't help now. It wouldn't help to. Nothing helps. Nothing works. I know, again, that sounds really dark, but that's the relief. That's the liberation. That is the freedom. The freedom is there's nothing you can do. It's just a happening. In the infinite, universal present moment, everything is just unfolding. And you begin to trust that everything is just unfolding exactly as it should be, exactly in the way that it's supposed to. That's it. In my experience, I mean, I think I began to go through the dark night of the soul when I first stopped drinking alcohol. I mean, I had probably years of just feeling fantastic. Sometimes they call this the pink cloud, where you just feel great because I was free of alcohol and liberated from my addiction. And so I felt great. But every now and then there's this dark night of the soul. And I essentially replaced the high of alcohol with exercise, which is a far healthier way of dealing with anxiety and depression. I would recommend it to anyone. Definitely get into your exercise and your training. And I went for a long time just throwing myself into the running and the dumbbells, and it was fantastic. But I didn't realize I was maybe falling into a bit of a trap of just replacing one ego identity with another, albeit a much healthier one. You know, I've essentially spent 10 years on one path as an alcoholic, and then the next 10 years doing completely the opposite, turning my life around, being a fitness, like a paragon of fitness and health. Um, these are just two identities. They're just two separate masks, basically. And eventually ran myself into the ground and had this back injury. And this triggered what I what I hope is my final dark night of the soul. Because with this back injury, I can't run, I can't train, I can't even do my job properly. And this identity shift that happens, I find that the universe just finds a way to kind of do it for you. I knew even when I was running and feeling happy, there was still this background. There's just this very deep part of you, and if you're on the spiritual path, you'll be developing this intuition and this insight. I just knew with a sense of horror, this isn't it either. The alcohol didn't solve the problem. The exercise won't solve the problem. Even the meditation won't solve the problem. I realized there's something else going on here. I never quite fully get to this thing called happiness. What is going on? And it's only through deep insights into the non-dual understanding, the Advaita understanding, that you realize, oh, the the problem is me. Like the thief dressed as a policeman looking for the thief and then forgetting that he's the thief. That policeman ain't going to find that thief anywhere. Where's the thief? Cannot find this thief anywhere. Well, that's because you are the thief. You just put on the policeman's clothes and forgot. Um, so essentially, I just wanted to give a bit of my experience on this, because there were times when I, for days, all I could do was just lay in bed being in pain, quite severe pain at times. Not This isn't a sob story. This is just what happened. This is just what happened. That's just how it is. Can't do anything. Can't socialize. Can't go to work. Can't even entertain myself. Couldn't watch any films, and couldn't play any computer games. Couldn't do anything. Couldn't do anything. There was nothing I could do, and there was nothing I could not do either, because I wasn't resting because it was painful. So in the beginning, you panic and you get all depressed and you go, oh God, everything's awful and terrible. And then, well, for one thing, I developed a lot of very powerful meditations for chronic pain and developed a few of my own sort of techniques in order to give myself some relief from this chronic pain because it was getting real bad at times. And eventually, something strange just starts to happen. Something just starts to shift. It's beyond anything. It's beyond acceptance, because acceptance is an act. Acceptance is a doing, a function of the mind. But even that goes. You can't even accept it because pain is unacceptable by its own nature. It just is, and you begin to, as all of the false stuff falls away, you just begin to sink into the it just is. And in the present moment, it's not a problem. It just is. It's just an energy. It's just a happening. And now, whatever happens, externally, internally, good, bad, up, down, left, right, whatever happens is just a happening. And there is a profound peace that comes with that. From the outside perspective, it would look like the crisis to end all crises. My God. I mean, you spent 10 years recovering from that alcohol and then you suffered a debilitating injury. I mean, you must be in the depth of despair. No, actually. No, not at all. I feel peaceful. I feel free. There's nothing left to do. It just is. There's just an isness to everything. Nothing has ended because there was nothing there in the first place. It's an experience. Life is an experience. You are not the experiencer of life. You are the experience of life. You are consciousness having an experience. On the subject of experience, I will reaffirm, if you haven't experienced a dark night of the soul, or you're not experiencing one, that doesn't mean you are not awakening or you're not enlightened. Not everyone goes through one. I believe not everyone needs to go through one. I think some people come to this planet, some people come into this existence, this manifestation, without a great deal of work left to do. And this is why I believe some people leave early. And if you are suffering the loss of a little one, they just didn't have that much work to do here. They just had a little bit left to do. They just had a few little bits left. They turned up, got it done, and then they gone again. They're fine. They are just fine. Everything is okay. It really is. And I believe a lot of people just don't really have a great deal to do, and so maybe there's a brief bit of a shadow, final little bit of doubt, and poof, gone, out. Just out the back door. That's all it was. But if you are going through it and it's real rough, here's my best advice. It's as though you're in free fall. That's what it feels like. And you're dropping down because all of your framework of belief, your ego and identity is disappearing all around you, and you feel like you're free falling through the void at breakneck speed, and you're terrified because you keep reaching out to grasp onto something, your usual coping mechanism. I'm going to grab onto talking to a friend. Yep, doesn't work. I'm going to try drinking again. Nope, doesn't work. Going to try smoking, going to try a new drug, I'm going to try mushrooms or something. I'm going to try this, that, and the other. A lot of people want to do the drugs but don't want to do the work, you know? But you keep reaching out to grab onto something, and only to realize everything you're trying to grab onto is an illusion. There's nothing there. It's the illusion of a ladder. You grab the rung and your hand goes straight through. Ah! And you're just falling, and you're terrified. But here is the crucial thing to understand. A fall is only terrified because you're worried about hitting the bottom. Falling isn't scary. Hitting the ground is scary. The fall itself isn't scary. Falling is fine. Hitting the ground is a problem. So the terror is because you think you're going to hit the ground at some point. There is no ground. That's the point. This free fall feeling is not falling. You are not falling, you are flying. There is no ground to hit. You are flying. You have finally achieved the thing that all humans have dreamt of since day one, the ability to fly. And that is what is happening with your consciousness, because you're not even in a physical body anymore. You are just infinite universal consciousness in flight. So change the perspective. You're not falling, you're flying. The second best advice I have is trust. Trust the other side. Trust the experience. Remember to actually do it. Remember to actually do it, because you'll keep waking up day after day, and your ego will keep trying to put the mask on. And remember to just keep going. No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. Not buying it. Not buying it. Not buying it. Because if you buy it, you're stuck. It's like a fish hook. If you're a fish swimming through the ocean and you see these hooks with lovely, tasty worms on them, don't eat the worm. Don't eat the worm. Trust it. Trust the other side. And one of the ways that ego will try to get a little hook in you and dangle down with a lovely juicy worm is you'll feel tempted to try and put a positive spin on things. But we're past that now. Don't worry about trying to put a positive. That all comes later. That all comes later. You'll end up doing the sort of stuff that I'm doing, doing talks and all this, that, and the other, all this nonsense. Don't try to put the positive spin on something that you can't put a positive spin on. There's nothing to spin. There is no spin. There's nothing. It's just nothing, 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 nothing. If you try to put a positive spin on things, you'll become frustrated. Attempting to control the process is a huge part of the problem. It's only going to result in more confusion, more chaos. Leave it all alone. Relieve yourself of the burden of trying to make everything okay. It just experience what you're experiencing. Whether that feels pleasant or unpleasant is sort of doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, whether you're enjoying it or not enjoying it. Worry about that later. I mean, eventually remember what's on the other side of this. I'll talk about that towards the end, because the third piece of advice, I almost said the third piece of good advice. It's not up to me to decide whether it's good advice or not. My third piece of general advice, a good analogy, is that you wouldn't interrupt a surgeon or a doctor doing a procedure just because it's uncomfortable. Let's say you're under a bit of anesthetic, or a dentist, something like that, and it's remarkably uncomfortable. You're under the anesthetic, so it doesn't hurt as such, but I mean, if you ever are in that position of having an operation under some kind of anesthesia and you can feel it, my God, it's pretty rough. But just because it's rough, just because it's uncomfortable or even painful, you wouldn't stop the surgeon from doing their job. You'd say it's better they did it. It's better they just got through to the end of it. Just do what you need to do, doc. Doc, gimme all of it. Give me the worst of it now. That's my general approach to things. Just doc, give me the good stuff. Cut the whole leg off if you need to. Cut whatever you need to off. I'll deal with it. Don't you worry about it. Just get it done. You don't stop them doing the procedure, and that's quite a good way to look at it. Just the worst part of you is being cut out, and it's not going to be happy with that. But just let it happen. You're there now. Trust the experience itself. And I know it's going to be painful. I don't want to come across unsympathetic. I get it. Trust, just please, just trust me. I've spent hours and hours writhing in psychological agony over this. I'm not trying to give a sob story or do anything like that. It's not about. I'm not trying to get pity. I'm just trying to say this is what happened in my experience. I just want to show I am sympathetic to this because I've been through it. I have been through the ringer, writhing in psychological agony through this dark night of the soul. Got chewed up and spat out the other side, only to realize nothing actually got spat out. and there was nothing to chew, and there was nothing chewing, and nothing actually happened. There is no dark night of the soul. Nothing is actually happening. It's all just an appearance in consciousness. Nothing is actually happening at all. You wouldn't interrupt a surgeon or a doctor or a dentist doing a procedure. So just trust the other side. Don't try to put the positive spin on things. And you can't even look forward to the future now because the future's disappeared as well, right? Even that, because you're fully established in the present moment. That's one of the most terrifying things that happened to me, is realizing there's no future. So what you're experiencing in the present moment feels like it's going on forever, because you can't even say, well, maybe it'll be better tomorrow, because you're only established within the present moment. It's like, whoa, okay, all right. So even the this too shall pass sort of feeling, even that's not helping. Yeesh. But I will say this. I will say this. You are so close to the end. You are so close to getting it. And what is waiting for you on the other side is the land of bliss. It is it is as good as has been promised. This is what was promised to you, and it's what is yours by right, because you are this. You are this peace. You are this love. You are this joy. You are the infinite, universal consciousness. And stay the course. Really do this now. Don't forget the. Don't lose sight of the incredible nature of what you're trying to achieve. It's rare. It's very rare for people to become fully liberated, for people to become fully enlightened. It's very I think it does happen a bit more than we might. It's just not everyone's as chatty as as other people are. So not everyone talks about it. Not everyone. A lot of people enlighten and then just sort of vanish, disappear. Sometimes physically, it does happen. Rainbow body, it does happen. But a lot of the time, when people enlighten, you'll just never hear from them again. And so it does happen. But just remembering the intensity of what it is that you're actually achieving here, and there's a reason. There is a reason that not many people go the entire distance. And it's because of this. It's because this is the final gate. This is the final barrier. Like in a computer game, the final boss is going to be the hardest one, isn't it? But you've got everything now. You've completed the game. You're just at the final boss. That's it. And don't go back now. Don't go back now. Get the game done. Get it finished. You're at the final boss. And remember everything you've learned along the way. Just remember all those things. Remember what you're trying to achieve here, because it's remarkable. And never lose sight of the fact that you're helping humanity in ways that you can't even begin to imagine. It is massive. When you liberate a single soul, being liberated echoes throughout eons of human existence. A single soul. You think about somebody like Jesus, or somebody like the Buddha, or somebody like Ramana Maharshi. You take a single figure like that and think about the impact that they had. And wow, I am not trying to say that I'm like that. Just realize that's my ego, my spiritual ego sneaking in there. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you can be the Buddha. I'm saying you can be Buddha. And think of the impact that had throughout the eons. Now, you could awaken and enlighten and never say a single word about it to anyone, and never act in an enlightened way, if such a thing exists. It doesn't. But even if you said nothing about it and never wrote a book, never wrote it down, never said anything to anyone about it, the waves of peace and freedom that would radiate off you on the deepest spiritual level would change millions of lives. I really mean it. You don't have to believe me. You really don't. Please don't believe me. Experience this for yourself. So don't lose sight of that. It's going through this is not just for you. It's not a little selfish thing where you're locked up in a little grief hole, and it's not like that. It's a coming to the end, seeing through the illusion and saying, I have to do this. If not you, who? If not you, then who? And if not now, when? And the last thing I would say is there's this thing that happens right at the very end, just as you're about to go through the final gate, is you just say, oh, yeah, but just one more thing. There's St. Peter's there and says, right, here you are. Here are the gates of heaven. In you go, champ. You did it. You really did it. You made it. Good job. In you go. And you go, okay, but let me just check my emails first. Let me just send one last email. Let me just do one last social media post. Let me just have one last conversation. Let me just go to the pub one last time. Let me just go speak to square it away with my friends one last time. Let me go get laid one last time before I enter the gates of heaven. And you do that. You mean you check your emails and you say, this email from Sports Direct are having a sale, 20% off. And you say, oh, St. Peter, just well, hold the gate open for me. I'm just going to go nip to Sports Direct. They got a new pair of trainers. I want to get these new pair of trainers to go stomp around in heaven in, because they're going to look dope, right? And you go off to Sports Direct, and before you know it, you're hooked back into ego. You're hooked back into the Maya, and you were there. You were right there. You almost had it. You almost went through into the gates of heaven, but at the last second, you had a one moment of doubt. Your ego tricked you. You checked your emails, and I'm not like literally your emails. Anything could happen. I mean, this could look like you were really deep in your spiritual path, going through a dark night of the soul, and you really were getting somewhere, and then you started a relationship. And maybe that's a difficult thing then, because you're suddenly now half in, half out. And it's this half in, half out state, like diving off the diving board and grabbing hold of the diving board on the way down. And now you're just clutching onto the edge of the diving board going, yep, I'm done. I mean, well, you're off the diving board, but you're not in the water yet. Get fully in before anything happens. Um, so get through to the other side. Get through to the other side of your dark night of the soul. No new stuff for the ego, for the person. Instead, complete the journey. Go all the way. All the way. Charles Bukowski has a wonderful poem about going all the way. If you're going to if you're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. It could mean not eating for 3 or 4 days. It could mean jail. It could mean freezing on a park bench. It could mean derision, mockery, isolation. Isolation is a gift. All the others are a test of your endurance, of how much you really want to do it. And you will do it, despite rejection and the worst odds. And it will be better than anything you can imagine. The nights will flame with fire. The gods wait to delight in you. A poem called Roll the Dice by Charles Bukowski. Go all the way. Finish the fight. Get through to the end. And if you're enduring that dark night of the soul right now, all of my words will be very cold comfort. They probably won't even be landing anywhere, really. But all I can say is keep going. Get through to the other side. The last thing I would like to say is a poem called The Well of Grief by David White. And it goes, those who will not slip beneath the still surface on the well of grief, turning down through its black water to the place we cannot breathe, will never know the source from which we drink, the secret water, cold and clear, nor find in the darkness glimmering the small round coins thrown by those who wished for something else. Oof, I think that says it all. That is the dark night of the soul as I understand it. And as I've experienced it and am still experiencing it and understand others experiencing it, and as with all things, it is nothing at all. Nothing actually happened. Nothing ever began, and nothing will ever end. You are not the individual, temporary, separate self. You are the infinite, universal consciousness. And this, the dark night of the soul itself, is the passing of a temporary, illusory self. And it's just a trick of perception, the illusion that screams and cries out as it dies, the shadow that dies. I mean, I know I said I've got one last point, and I really mean it now. Why does it happen in the first place? Is because it's just like if your room is incredibly messy, but the lights are off and it's very dark in there, you cannot see how messy it is. And the more you meditate and develop along the spiritual path, the more you're turning the light up. You're turning the light on. And now you can see just how much of a state your room truly is. And now you realize how much needs to be cleaned. That's why. That's why it can be so unpleasant on the journey. But it if you didn't turn the light on, the mess is still there. And without the light on, you just keep stubbing your toe on things and tripping over stuff, and the room stinks. Just because the light's off doesn't mean it's not messy. But then just because you turn the light on doesn't get rid of the mess. Cleaning the mess gets rid of the mess. Let's get to it, team. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I am so heartened by the response I've gotten to the power of Now What. I truly appreciate all the comments, all of the likes, all of the subscribes. I really, truly appreciate it. I've got big plans for what's coming. If you enjoy and benefit from my meditations and my podcast, please consider following me on Spotify. You can also subscribe to me on Spotify for $2.99 a month. That's less than the price of a coffee these days. You can also subscribe to me on YouTube. That would help me out a great deal too. It will support me and allow me to continue and develop my work in this realm, in this field, and continue, hopefully, to provide some spiritual entertainment as well as spiritual guidance. You can also find me on Instagram, Corin_Bryant_. You can find me on Facebook. I welcome everything. Let's connect. Let's get chatting. Please feel free to drop a comment if you'd like me to talk about any particular subject, or if you have any comments, queries, insights, or anything. And I think that's everything I have today. Thank you again so much for listening. And I have nothing but love, gratitude for you if you have put so much work in that you've ended up at the dark night of the soul. Remember, it is always darkest before the dawn. Take care, be well, and stay present.